and off probation and you've completed that sentence, you can register to vote. And also, you cannot have been deemed or sentenced or judged by a judge to have been mentally incompetent. So those are the things that are required for you to register to vote in Georgia. Okay, let's talk about how you can vote by absentee. Again, we've distinguished between what it means to do mail-in voting, which is not what we do in Georgia, but we do absentee ballot voting. And it is a mail-in ballot, but it's not the misnomer of mail-in voting, which is done in other states, which is when you vote totally by mail. Okay, Georgia does not require that you provide your elections office with a reason to vote by absentee. We used to require that, but we no longer do. If you want to vote by absentee, you can. If you feel like that it is not safe during this COVID time to come out and vote, you do not have to vote in person. You can request an absentee and you do not have to provide us with a reason. Now, there's some confusion when the Secretary of State's office sent out absentee ballots to everyone early on during the June election. Most people thought, or I don't want to say most people, but a lot of people believed that they were automatically going to receive absentee ballots the remainder of the year because the state sent them out to everyone. That was a one-time event because of the COVID epidemic. They decided they were going to send them out to everyone because we were unsure whether or not we were going to open up the polls for in-person voting. We canceled or postponed the presidential preference primary, and we did open the polls for the election in June. So they did not send out absentee ballots to every single voter again. So we went back to regular requests for absentees. That confused a lot of people who were expecting to get an absentee ballot again. So I want to clarify this year who gets an absentee ballot. So let me explain how you get an absentee ballot, which is currently the way we're doing things in November, which is currently the correct way to get an absentee ballot. You get an absentee ballot if you request one for the entire election cycle. What that means is, let's say at the very beginning of the year, which was the presidential preference primary in March, you are one of three categories. You're elderly, 65 years of age or older, you are disabled, or you're temporarily going to be out of the county. You can mark that on your first application and then state that you're one of the three and therefore you want to get an absentee ballot for the remainder of the entire elections year. That means the election cycle, which will be the remainder of the elections year until it ends, usually in November, or if it's a runoff that continues throughout that cycle. That person who marks or checks one of those three will get an application automatically and only has to request it one time. Those are what we call the rollover absentees. It's just a word we use. If you're on the rollover list, you only have to request it once by checking the box there on your absentee. It's about right here, if you can see. This is the absentee, and right here is where you would mark checking one of these three categories and sending that in at the beginning of the election cycle. If you mark that, it could be confusing because you may mark it and say, well, I'm disabled or I'm elderly. And some folks mark it not realizing that's going to get them on the rollover list. So you have to be very careful about marking that because that is indicating you want an absentee ballot the rest of the year. You can undo it by calling our office or letting us know you want to be taken off that list, but it's very handy for folks who don't want to have to request one every single election. So that's the way you get an absentee the remainder of the year. Elderly, disabled, temporarily residing out of the county. That includes what we call the UOCAVA voters, if you've ever heard that term. Those are for the folks under the uniformed, and now I can't remember that, Miss Susan, by myself. I'm going to have to pull it up on my slides. All right, the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act, which means If you have dual citizenship, where you live in 2 different countries, but your primary residence is Georgia, you can vote here. If you are a uniform person, you're in the military, then you could get a UOCAVA ballot. And or if you're going to be out of the country for various reasons, you're visiting, you're traveling, we have missionaries that get UOCAVA ballots. So those are some of the ways that you get on the absentee rollover list. All right. Moving right along, get to my next slide so I don't take too much time. I have had questions by quite a few people. How much postage is an absentee ballot require? To date, it requires 1 stamp. So unless the postage goes up right now, it takes 1 stamp. If you return your absentee ballot to our office, the process requires this. The outer envelope must be signed. If it's not signed, we can't accept it, but we do everything we can to contact that elector to have them come in and sign that ballot before election. So we try our best to make sure that the elector's contacted. So if you're voting absentee, please make sure you sign it. We verify the signatures with the signatures that are on file with our office to help prevent fraud. And then thirdly, we scan them in our ElectionNet system, which is a state database. That checks them in to tell us that you have voted by absentee. There's a reason for that. And then we lock them in locked drop boxes, which are locked inside our elections room and are under video surveillance. That's the way our office does it. Lastly, we have, the state has gone to drop boxes. Every office is required to have a drop box. Some offices or some counties are larger than ours, have more than 1 drop box. Ours is located outside our building. It's affixed to the wall permanently. It has a surveillance camera that stays on it 24 hours a day, and absentee ballots can be dropped there. It's a very secure way to get your ballot directly to us. We've never had any issues with the Postal Service. We get our ballots. We've not had any that we've been told have been lost here in Towns County. We have had some ballots that have gotten to us late, but the postmark was late. We send out letters letting folks know when the ballots have not been counted because they were mailed late. But those have been very, very few at our office. Okay, I'll talk briefly about spoils, cancel ballots, and safety precautions, and then I'm going to turn it over to for questions. What is a spoiled ballot? A lot of folks ask what that is. Spoiled ballots are when we have to ask Ms. Charlotte and her colleague Betty Phillips to come in, which is our vote review panel, to decide how that voter intended to vote. These judges are appointed by the Superior Court judge, or they're approved by the Superior Court judge, and they represent 1 from each political party. And spoil ballots happen when there's tears or bends in a ballot and our scanner machine can't review it. So we have to sometimes, the review panel has to transfer that ballot onto a new ballot because the machine won't read it. Secondly, if you have markings that are outside the oval circles where the person is supposed to be voting, then the scanner can't read that because, or won't read it, it'll kick it out because of these outside stray markings. Thirdly, the elector may have marked both candidates or may have marked the choices for a referendum or a question, both choices. So then the scanner, of course, could not read that because there's not one selection. Stray markings may mean that the panel judges may have to decide how that voter intended to vote, and that's why you have 2 judges that are making that decision. Cancel ballots. This is a question that comes up a lot, and we see it a lot in early voting. How do you cancel a ballot? If an elector decides to come in during our early or advanced voting, or even on election day, and they decide that they want to cancel their absentee ballot that they've requested earlier, and they have it with them and they want to vote in person, they certainly have that right. If they have it in their possession, that's the perfect scenario. They surrender that ballot to a poll worker or to an election official, and we cancel it. We cancel it in our system, we mark canceled on it, and then we issue them a card and allow them to vote on the machines. Now, what we have to do is we have to verify in the ElectionNet system that we have not accepted their ballot. If we have received it in our office and there is a note in the ElectionNet system that we've accepted it, we cannot cancel that ballot. Now, if, of course, they're in possession of it, then we have not accepted it. But if someone says, I lost my ballot, I tore it up, I decided not to vote absentee, we must verify in our system that we have not accepted it. For the mere fact is that it could potentially be someone who is going to double vote. Now, if we've not accepted it in the system and everybody does what they're supposed to do, then we can cancel the ballot. But if we, for example, we've had this happen, it may be someone that has simply forgotten that they have voted absentee. It's been a month ago. It could be someone that for health reasons has just forgotten, and it's an honest mistake. Then, of course, we would have to let them know we've already accepted their ballot, which means it's back there in a locked box getting ready to be counted. So we have to, we can't allow them to vote in person, or they would be voting twice technically. Okay, again, they can surrender, or what if they don't have their ballot? Good question. We let them sign a sworn affidavit stating that they wish to cancel their ballot if they don't have it with them, and that's as long as we've not accepted it. If you've read in the paper where Fox says, the Fox News had printed, or just the regular news, I think Atlanta Journal also, the Secretary of State issued that 1,000 ballots or 1,000 voters had double voted. That's what I'm alluding to, the problem with it's possible election officials had not checked the accepted box and allowed people to vote in person, even though those ballots had already been accepted. It could have been a human error where they had not scanned the ballots and therefore had not entered them as accepted, and they were counted and had not been scanned. Human error, I don't know that 1,000 people intentionally were trying to defraud or vote twice, or it was a little of both, but there's checks and balances and things you can do in the county to ensure that this does not occur. All right. Lastly, let's talk about voting now during the time in which we are concerned about COVID. Safety precautions. What we're doing in Towns County. If you come to vote in person at one of our 3 precincts, we will have plexiglass shields that will be in use at your check-in. We have been using those all year, and we will use those in November. Poll workers are required to wear the face mask. We work with our county commissioner and our emergency management director, and we can require that our workers wear face masks, but we cannot enforce that a voter do that. It's the voter's right. So we will not require voters wear masks, but we are asking that our poll workers wear masks. If a poll worker is uncomfortable doing that and feels like that we are violating their rights, then we do not utilize those poll workers with the public. We can find things for the poll workers to do that are not working with the public. We implement the social distancing 6-foot measures that are recommended by the CDC at all times. We mark those off with bright orange tape. We use the Sheriff's Office provides us with barriers, and of course we have signs. So we try to implement those as best we can. We also have hand sanitizers and disposable gloves and face masks that we make available to the public and to the voters there so that they can use those as they deem appropriate. In closing, I want to share with you one of the greatest tools we have in Georgia that the public is not always aware of, and we try to get this information out there. We have wonderful allies in our Republican and Democratic Party chairs in that they are helpful in getting this information out on their websites. My voter page, it is part of the Georgia Secretary of State and the state of Georgia's website services, and it's located at www.mvpsosga.gov, and it's called My Voter Page, MVP. It is a wonderful resource because rather than people having to call our office for various questions and wondering if they have registered, when they're going to get their registration card, poll locations, dates, times, etc., or even requesting an absentee ballot, they can get all this information and documents from this voter page. It can be used to verify voter registration status. It can let you know if you've been registered, if you are registered, if you're not. It can verify mail-in application and ballot status. It can tell you the different poll locations for your county. It can tell you your early voting locations. It can tell you all your elected officials, registration information filed at county offices, sample ballots for an upcoming election. That's very, very helpful. And also provisional ballot status. Did my provisional ballot count? So that is a wonderful tool. You can get documents there, which you can pull off absentee applications and then mail them back in. You can register to vote online. And so it is a wonderful resource that can save a lot of time if the information gets out there. So I may have gone a little bit over. I apologize, Miss Susan and Mary, and I will close with that. So I will turn it back over to you ladies.
Okay, I've got one question, Janet, and I don't think that this issue has been as critical here as it has been in the other areas of the states where there were, significant problems with voting in the last election. But can you just briefly differentiate, tell me what the roles and responsibilities are of the Secretary of State's office versus the responsibilities of the local offices like that you oversee?
That's a good question, Mary. The Secretary of State is responsible for Georgia elections. They are responsible for ensuring that we are fully aware of the state law and the rules and for our training, and that we get the tools necessary to do our job. So if the county's officials, if we violate any of the the rules, and it's state rules, which are they govern how we, our conduct and how we conduct elections. If we violate those rules, then they are our disciplinary arm. They oversee us and they can discipline us. So we can be brought before the state election board. The state election board oversees the county boards and our work. And so they set the rules and the process by which we conduct elections. They are they're our overseer, our disciplinarian arm, and they are responsible for the elections process. They so they give us what we need, and we roll out the process at a county level. So we're 139 offices that work under the large umbrella of the state, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and if you felt like you didn't have an adequate number of machines or polling places or whatever, would it be up to you then to let the Secretary of State know that, and they would provide those to you?
They provide us with resources. For example, they purchase all the machines, equipment, the elections equipment that we use. So if we don't have adequate equipment, we would contact them and make that request. As far as logistics, that would be incumbent on the counties. We would have to, our boards govern that. Logistically, if your county needs more polling places or precincts, then that would be at a county level. Your board would need to meet and work that out. Your financial resources would go through the county. So you would work with whomever manages your budget. And if there is legislation that requires that you get the proper funding through your county resources for that. And so there are things that trickle down through the counties and are managed through the counties. If at some point you were not able to handle that with the county, you could appeal to the state, and the state would probably be able to intervene at some point. But there are, the state provides you with the resources, the equipment, and then there are things that your that are delegated to the counties that at a county level. Like if you have insufficient numbers of poll workers, then you would need to get out and do a plan to try to recruit poll workers. If it got to the point where you still were had a shortage, then you would need to contact the state for help.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions, or we'll move on to Rebecca? And if you think of something, we'll have time at the end too. Are you with us, Rebecca?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, take it away.
Okay. I really appreciate you guys letting me be on. You'll have to ignore the noise. I am at my son's baseball game, so you'll probably hear some yelling here in a minute. But our election is on November 3rd, just like Georgia's. It will be just a general election, and our one-stop voting begins October 15th through the 31st. And what one-stop voting is just early voting. You can come to my office at 54 Church Street, and you can vote for any reason that you want to, whether you just are going to be out of town, whether you just don't want to wait in line on election day, you know, any reason you want. And those hours are Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, Saturday the 17th and 24th from 7 to 5, and on Saturday the 31st from 8 to 3. The last day to register to vote would be October the 9th at 5 o'clock at my office. We would have to have your registration in our office by 5 that day. But if you miss that deadline, you can come during the early voting and do a registration and vote during one stop, but you are required to bring proof of ID and proof of residency. So, and we also offer absentee by mail, which is where you request a form and you come by, I mail it to you, I can email it to you. You would fill out the form, and once I get that back, then I will mail you a ballot. The last day to request one of those would be October 27th at 5. Now, if for some reason you say you're put in the hospital or disabled, then you have that option, or your immediate family can request an absentee ballot, and I can hand it to them. They can come in the office, do the form, and I would actually hand them the ballot. And then it has to be, all absentee by mail ballots have to be back in our office by 5 o'clock on election day, or postmarked by election day and received by that Friday. So you have plenty of options. You can vote absentee by mail for any reason, just like you can vote in person on early voting for any reason. Our voting on election day on the 3rd of November would be from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. All 9 of our polls will be open during those hours, and we'll have plenty of workers that will have one doing line control and making sure people stay in 6 feet apart, and we'll also have a sanitizer there along with our regular workers who will be sanitizing the booths between each voter. So some of the precautions that we're taking, I saw a question there but it disappeared on my phone. Some of the precautions that we're taking, our computer judges and our ballot people will be in front of plexiglass shields, and then all of our workers will be wearing masks. Voters are not required to wear a mask, but we will have them if they would like. And we will have a limit on the people in one stop and in the precincts. So there will be some lines. Let's see. You do not have to have ID to vote in North Carolina unless you registered for the first time and didn't provide it. And on election day, for people who cannot come in due to age or physical disability, can vote in the car, and we would come out to them. They can do that at early voting or on election day. So I do ask, though, that everybody's just plan on the lines. It may take a little longer due to lines or extra people voting curbside. So then, let's see, I'm not as organized as Miss Janet, so, but we do have a drop box outside of our office, but you cannot put anything in it right now. North Carolina requires that when you bring a ballot back to our office, that you or your immediate family have to sign a form showing that you brought that back. An immediate family is husband, wife, mother, father, child, brother, sister, thing, you know, immediate family like that. So the thing on absentee ballots is we have the return envelope will have a place for the voter to sign, and also for a witness. They have to have one witness in the room with them while they are voting. And that witness has to put their name and address and sign the absentee ballot return envelope. If that is not done, there are ways that we can cure that. Right now, it would be if the voter didn't sign, I would send them a letter. If there's no witness envelope, I would reissue a ballot. So there is some changes coming, but I haven't gotten those yet. So just make sure that if you're voting absentee by mail, that you have your witness and you make sure and sign in the correct place and sign your correct envelopes.
Rebecca, we have a question. If you would go over the times again for early voting on the Saturdays.
Sure. Saturday the 17th and the 24th will be from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And on Saturday the 31st, which is the last day, will be from 8 to 3.
And then we have another question asking what safeguards exist in North Carolina to prevent double voting, like Janet was talking about in Georgia, where they check the cancellations and.
Yes, ma'am. We do cancellations every Friday. I go to the state website and I check for people who have passed away, people who are registered in other counties in North Carolina, because the state will cross-check those and put them on a list. Also, we'll check for felons, and those are done every Friday. And then closer to the election, it's done every day. So that way we can do that. And then if someone does, say, an absentee by mail ballot, if they've sent that back in and we have it, those won't be released until 7:30 on election night. But if they don't send it in and decide to vote in person, they can just come to early voting or go to their precinct and vote. And as long as we've not got it back, then they can do that and it'll cancel it out automatically.
I have a question. Oh, I forgot what it was. Darn it. Never mind. I'll come back.
North Carolina has done a new program called Ballot Tracks that where if you do an absentee by mail, you can track your ballot in the process, where you can see where it's at in the post office, if it's made it back to us, things like that. And if you want information on that, you can just call me at the office next week. I'll have the details then. It just launched on Friday afternoon. So then also the state website is a great resource for anybody. And that website is www.ncsbe.gov, like North Carolina State Board Elections.gov. And there is an absentee ballot portal on there that you can request an absentee ballot. And that is sent directly to me. So you don't have to come in the office, you don't have to mail it, anything like that. And then there you can check if you're registered, you can see where your precinct is, you can look at your sample ballot. All kinds of information are on the state website. We also have sample ballots in our office if anybody would like those. So.
Okay, another question we have. If someone requested an absentee ballot but decides not to mail it in but deliver it to the election board during early voting, will the ballot get put into the machine or dropped in a box to be counted along with the ones that are received in the mail?
It would be dropped to be counted at a board meeting at another time.
I would want to follow up then. Can they say they've changed their mind and do early voting instead?
yes, we can cancel that ballot out and vote in person at that point in time if they would like.
Okay, and then another question is, somebody's asking for you to explain more about voting from the car, how that works.
We have what we call curbside spots, and there would be a sign for curbside. And if, like I said, if age or physical disability, you can't come into the precinct and vote, or Lord forbid that you have COVID-19 and you can't come in, we would come to the car to you, and you would give us your name and your address, and we would go back in, and they would look you up in the computer and get all your information, get your paperwork, and then they would come back out with your ballot, and you would vote it and put it in a manila envelope, manila folder when you're done, and then that worker would take your ballot in and put it into the machine and then they'd come back out and say, everything's good. We have you wait just in case that, say you overvoted and marked more than you should have, say it was a vote for one office and you voted for two, then we would come back out and tell you and give you your options at that point.
Then one more question. What are the dates and times for picking up an absentee ballot in Clay County?
You can pick that up right now. Well, you can pick up the form anyway. We started mailing ballots on September the 4th. So you can do that right now. And then as soon as I have that form, then I will mail you a ballot. And the last day to request one would be October the 27th at 5.
That's all the questions I'm seeing in chat. If you have a question, you can write in chat or unmute yourself and ask it.
And it is only one stamp also to return an absentee by mail, if anyone has that question.
I had a question for Janet. When a person walks in and decides to vote in person instead of using their absentee ballot, would their vote in the polling place become a provisional ballot, or would it just go ahead and be counted, and then if their absentee ballot showed up later, would that just be disregarded?
If the voter comes in and wishes to cancel their absentee, then once we go into our ElectionNet system, if it's not been accepted, that means we have not received it, then we cancel it and they can vote on our machines. So they vote like anyone else. We make them a card and they use the ballot marking devices. They do not have to vote provisional. So their absentees cancel regardless of whether we get it later or not. There's no way we can accept it because we would check the system and our system would not accept it because it's been canceled. So they would vote like anyone else.
And then I have a question for Rebecca. Why are voters not required to wear masks in North Carolina since it's a state mandate? Let's see.
We have a special provision under being a government entity that we do not require voters to wear a mask, but they do have the option. We have them. We'll offer them gloves. We'll have sanitizer for when they come in and when they leave. The state is taking great precautions to keep every voter safe. So, but they're not required to, but workers will be required to.
Will there be 2 poll workers going to obtain the curbside votes if this person feels like there needs to be more than one person to safeguard against any fraud?
We typically only have one worker that goes out. If the voter felt uncomfortable, we could pull someone and do a second one if they needed it.
Right, I'm not seeing any more questions. Mary, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I don't. But I've definitely learned some things, and I so appreciate both of our presenters taking some of their time on Sunday afternoon to fill us in on all the ins and outs of voting in this very important election and during a pandemic.
Yes, and I just wanted to thank y'all both for the references where people can check their voter status and the status of their absentee ballots. I'm going to put them in the chat right now. So
Thank you.
thank y'all all for coming, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Yeah, and we will be putting up Janet's PowerPoint presentation and a recording of this event on our PPN elections page and on our website for anybody that missed it and you know, want to have some of their questions answered.
Rebecca, what's the phone number of the Board of Elections?
It is 389-6812.
And I also wanted to just do a quick commercial for, we're hosting our first candidate forum in collaboration with Mountain True and the Hinton Center. We're going to be having a candidate forum on, let's see, September 22nd. And Susan Landis and Carl Gillespie will be answering questions on healthcare, financial security, and the environment. So I guess that's it.
Thank you.